Okay, well, I'm pretty much a lifelong Californian. I wasn't born in California, but I've lived in California most of my life, and I grew up in way down in San Diego. But I went to school in San Luis Obispo, and I studied natural resources management, and we'll talk more about that. And I graduated in the late 1980s. So at that point, I came to work in Los Angeles County as a forester for their fire department, and have a huge fire department in Los Angeles County, as you might imagine. But we had a small group of foresters, a forestry department. And so throughout my career, I started out at the bottom, entry level. I worked my way up through the different positions to the chief of the forestry division. And then from there, I went up one level higher to be a deputy chief in the fire department, where I was over the forestry division and over a health hazardous materials division and fire prevention people. But so although my forestry job was mostly urban and some wildland, um, when I'm going to talk about forestry today, I'm going to talk more about all the different forestry jobs that are more probably away from a place like Los Angeles County, because I really want to share with you some of the I think we have a president of SAF right now. We have somebody we elect every year. And one thing he said is he says he thinks we are missing out by not talking to high schoolers, because people in high school are making decisions about their life based on people they know, people around them, and what they're exposed to. So hearing that from him and then having this opportunity is great for us. So I retired from the fire department in 2020, last year, and then I've just been kind of transitioning to retirement and working in forestry, and I may do a little consulting later or some other projects. But right now I've just been doing this chair and working with a lot of my fellow foresters.
That's awesome. Okay, so I guess my first question would be, what are some of the common jobs in this field of work?
Well, a lot of them you've probably heard of, and you think of, like when you go to the state park, you see the park ranger, right?
Right.
That's one, and that's probably most people's common. Oh, you wear a smoky hat and you're in the park, right? Well, there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, we have people who are foresters, and foresters are involved with trees, but they're involved with often growing trees. Some are involved with buying trees. Some are involved with getting trees, what we call a procurement forester, who actually goes out and looks at trees so we can get them to the mill so we can have lumber. We have utility foresters that work for PG&E, Southern Cal Edison, and the other big utilities to make sure that the trees are not growing into the power lines. And we know how dangerous that's been with all the fires, right? We have, in addition to the park ranger, we have people like a park administrator. We have people like hydrologist. Water is very important, and water that comes off the forest is a very clean source of water for all of our drinking water. So that's an important feature. We have people involved in environmental, like interpreters and stuff like that put together programs, and teach people about the environment and nature. We have, of course, a lot of people who become professors. They go on and they get their master's and their PhD, and then they teach forestry or natural resources. And then we have people like myself, fires and fuel managers. That's what basically my forestry job was making sure that we have a lot of people in Los Angeles County who live in areas affected by fires, just like you have seen over the last few years with Oakland and all the big fires you've had up there in Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz and everywhere. You guys are just like Southern California now. So it's very important that we keep the vegetation away from the homes, and in spite of our best efforts, these enormous fires, when they come, we're just trying to save lives and make sure that property is secondary at that point, because we just have to get people out. So there's a lot of a variety of careers. And I know your next question's about some more little obscure more jobs. And so some of those I wrote down were things you might not think of, like somebody who grows all the trees so they can put them in the forest, a nursery manager. We have forest scientists, people who have, the really smart people. They go on to advanced degrees and then they go out and study genetics and insects and disease and stuff like that. We have people who run those mills, people who run the actual mill, people who buy logs. And then a couple other ones that I thought were really interesting is, we get more and more talking about storage of carbon. And forests store carbon, especially a healthy growing forest. So we actually have people who study the forest and analyze the carbon in the forest. So there's a lot of peripheral careers. And what I've seen sometimes is people, they don't really know what they want to do with life, and they maybe go get a business degree, right? I'm going to go get a business degree. They get that, and then they decide, boy, I really want to do something in forestry. That's what I like. I like being outdoors. So then they go get their master's degree in forestry, and then somehow they end up melding, and then they become a timber investment person or something like that. They meld their careers. So it's there's a lot of different ways you can go with it, I guess is what I say. You think of the park ranger, and that's just one of 50 different opportunities.
Right. Okay, that's awesome. And then I guess my next question would be, how's the work life experience?
Well, that's a really good question because in my career, and I think in a lot of careers, you have the routine. Okay. You have your calendar. Okay. Hey, it's January. We need to do A, B, and C. It's August. We need to start getting ready for this. But you always have the emergency or the disaster or the thing that happens that takes precedent over everything else. And then that's the non-routine. And that's when everybody has to, okay, for example, in the fire department, COVID. I mean, what are the fire department people doing now? They're setting up vaccination sites, right? They had to set up testing sites. That's all non-routine. And meanwhile, all their routine stuff is they're trying to do it. They're trying to get to it. They know a lot of it is going to have to wait until the emergency's over. Now, COVID's an extreme one. Often we're dealing with a fire, earthquake, or some other thing that doesn't last that long. And those might take a week, and then there's cleanup for a few more weeks, or community meetings or something like that, but then you get back to the routine. So that's kind of, all these jobs are that way. And it can be a local thing, like maybe you have a big rainstorm and you have a little park that you manage, and now your roads are washed out, or your culverts filled up. So for a couple weeks, you've got to fix that and get your road fixed, and then you can get back to your routine.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next thing is, about how many hours a week do people in this career generally work, just on an everyday basis?
So generally, it's a full-time job, and I'd say, now there are some part-time things, again, if you're working at a park, but most people are looking for a career. And most of these jobs are good jobs with benefits, with leave, vacation. They have, and especially if you're working for like a government agency, they have those things. Let's see. It's what's different about it is a lot of times, especially when you're young, you're working in some place that's kind of remote. Like when I started, I worked in a state park, and it was down in San Diego, but it was like an hour away from town. So you'd kind of get your food, and it was your 5 days to go up there. And so you go up there and you just be up at the park for a week. And if you needed anything, there might be a little general store, but then you have to go down the hill to get something. And and especially when you're a young person and you're starting out, if you want to be in this field, you got to kind of go where the jobs are. So you're probably going to be going somewhere where you're the only you'd be lucky if like someone else from your college is there, but you might be the only person there working with 3 or 4 other people. And you have to be kind of independent. You have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone a little bit.
That makes sense. And then do people in the utilities industry typically work a lot of overtime, or maybe like 24 hours plus shifts?
So it goes kind of back to that routine and non-routine I was talking about. The routine is, you work your regular week or your regular shift and you go home. Maybe you work a weekend or a Saturday once in a while, special project or something like that, but not anything out of the ordinary. I will say in a park, like if you work in a park,
Mhm.
you work the weekends, you work the holidays. Those are the busiest times at a park. So if you're a park ranger, you're typically going to have like Tuesday and Wednesday off, the slow days in the park. Okay.
Right.
So that's one thing about working in a park. You're going to be working when everyone else is recreating. So that's something to think about. But then you get to go play when everyone else is at work. See?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So, but again, in the non-routine, then you can get into a lot of overtime. Then you can get called for a 24-hour shift.
Right.
Now we are much better these days about not making people work 24 hours because we understand we've had loss of life, frankly, for people who were too tired and they were driving a van full of firefighters or something like that. And then the van went off the road or something terrible. So we really try and stress now a work rest ratio. And that means, hey, you might be on a fire and I might need you to work 16 hours, but I'm going to have you rest 8 hours before I ask you to work another 16. Doesn't sound that great, but it's a lot better than working 48 straight.
That is
Okay.
true. That is true.
Yeah. And we always want to rest people again before we put them back on the road. Often people have come from long distances and maybe they've driven their fire truck or their vehicle a long ways. We want to make sure that they have a safe vehicle to drive home, and we're going to inspect it and we're going to make sure they're rested because we don't feel like until everyone's home that we've done our job.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That makes sense.
Yep.
And then my next thing would be when you joined this career, did you receive on-the-job training? And is that something commonly available to people in this field?
So I think this is a great question also. These are good questions. Um, I think what the most important thing you do in high school and college is you learn how to learn, okay? Because
Right.
wherever you go to work, it doesn't matter if you go to work in a hospital or the post office or Nordstrom's or whatever, they're going to teach you how they do it there, okay? Bonnie, this is how we do it here, okay? And this is what we do. And so you need to be able to uh, learn, retain knowledge, be able to train other people. And then I always think they're always looking for new people to go to special training or go to a class or go to an assignment, and you want to stick your hand up because that's going to be an opportunity for you to distinguish yourself from everyone else and say, oh, she wants to go do this, or these two people want to go do this. And then all of a sudden, guess what? Now next time they want to do something, hey, does this person want to do it again because they were great last time. And so I think it's important that you learn your craft and you learn whatever you're studying. You learn the nomenclature, you learn the words, you learn the big concepts. But again, it's like if you go into a career, they teach you 100 things. Okay, this is 100 things you need to know for this career. But yet when you go to work for somebody, you're going to do 20 of them all the time. The other 80, right? You're not going to do those. So you're going to get really good at those 20 and they're going to teach you how they do them. And so I think it's important just to say, hey, when they're looking for volunteers, you know, uh, this is your career, I understand in school, sometimes maybe you want to sit in the back of the class. You want to just kind of take it easy. You want to be back there. When this is your career, boy, you want to be like paying attention. You want to be up in the front. You want to be like, I'm interested, and I think
Right.
that's really going to help anybody in any career.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
And then I guess this is kind of a follow-up with your answer to the previous question. But what educational background do people in this career generally have? I know there isn't one track, but do you think
Right.
there's a general sort of
Yeah, so most of the jobs I talked about were people who would have a 4-year bachelor's degree, okay? And but there are some opportunities for some AA degrees in the field also. So I want to talk about both. Starting with the bachelor's degree, I don't want to undersell any other universities, but there's 3 main universities in college in California. Just starting with the North, Humboldt State trains foresters. UC Berkeley is probably our oldest forestry school in California, and they train great foresters and great natural resources professionals. I guess that wouldn't surprise anybody, UC Berkeley. And then Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. That's kind of our more southern university. Now we do have Cal Poly Pomona, and they have kind of a natural resources program, but not as well established as the other three. So those are the three main universities. Now, thinking of kind of your area up there in San Jose, the other two community colleges that come to mind are Reedley. Reedley's out by Fresno, out on the other side of the valley, and then Shasta Community College, which is up north by Redding. They have what they call forestry technician programs, which will get you some basic knowledge, so 2-year knowledge, an AA degree, and will get you a job working in the woods. One thing I can say right now is we have a shortage of workers to go out into the woods. We've looked at this. There's a shortage of people like truck drivers. A lot of truck drivers are getting very old. We don't have young truck drivers. So, and so a place like Shasta College has a certificate program teaching people how to be a truck driver, not necessarily an AA degree, and it also has a certificate program for forest workers. And they've actually bought, with grants from the state, forestry equipment, loaders and skidders and stuff that students can practice on and utilize. So when they go to the field, and so this is really a cool thing. Like, again, how I said they'll train you their way. Well, usually in the forest industry, they're going to train you on one piece of equipment. And then someday somebody gets sick and you have to fill in, and then you start learning a new piece of equipment. In this program at Shasta College, they are letting you operate each piece of equipment as a student. So when you get to the field, they say, what can you operate? I can operate all 5 pieces of equipment. So and we really, and as you've seen, we've had all these fires. We have our forest overgrown. We need to put a lot of effort into our forest. So having these young forest workers, there's a lot of opportunity right now, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So there's that, and then there's the 4-year degrees too, which go to a lot of the earlier positions I was talking about,
And then I guess this is just a follow-up. Do you think people who, let's say, do that 4-year track and they get that bachelor's degree in forestry, would they have any major advantage when they're trying to get a job as to someone who completed that 4-year degree and then went on to get a master's?
Well, I think what's really important about our field is, and I go back to when I was a student, I know it's 30 years ago, but I still work with a lot of students, and I talk to students, and it's very important that you get seasonal work, okay, that you don't go to school year round. There's a lot of summer jobs. So go out and get a summer job at a park. Go out and get a summer job up in Lake Tahoe. Go to some different areas. See, and then now, when you get out of school, you have your degree, you have your resume, but you don't always have a lot of experience. And if you can show, hey, I worked a season in the state park, I worked in my little local park where I live in San Jose, then I went up and worked at Lake Tahoe for 2 seasons. Now, not only do you have some of that good stuff on your resume experience, you have some things that I don't want to work in San Jose. I liked it in Lake Tahoe, or vice versa, or I want to go up to the Redwoods or something. It gives you, it makes you a little more well-rounded when someone's looking at you. So I think it's, and that goes for whether you have an undergrad degree, a BS degree, or a master's degree, that you need to, we have a lot of people that just are very educated, but they don't have a lot of experience. And so it's good to have a balance if you can.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I guess my next thing is, specifically for your union, are there any internships and maybe apprenticeships that are usually offered?
Yeah, well, it's kind of, I think I just described it. It's more like there are sometimes some internships. There are things associated with the schools. A lot of times the schools have projects they're working on, and they may take you on as an internship or an apprenticeship.
Right.
But often it's those summer experiences, I started out working like you would expect at a park, being that person at the front gate, taking your $3 so you can go have a picnic, and then I learned from the park ranger, and I learned from the park maintenance people, and but I started out, emptying trash cans and taking care of visitors. That's kind of how you start.
Right, right. And then I guess, how has this career changed you as a person?
Well, I think that this career is I always liked natural resources. I always liked I before I even knew to call it natural resources. I grew up like backpacking and Boy Scouts and being outdoors. So I really wanted to work in an outdoor environment. Now it's kind of funny. I ended up coming to Los Angeles and actually working indoors a lot, but the same kind of things as far as uh, you know there's leaders and followers. I guess I was always kind of a leader, so it was kind of easy for me in the fire department to work with people and so forth. But I also was from I wasn't like from a fire department family. A lot of people, like their dad was a firefighter, their uncle was a firefighter, so they've come up through it. I was kind of from the outside, but I think I think this kind of career just helps you strengthen your traits.
Right,
If you're a good leader, it helps you. If you're a good independent thinker, there, if you're a good writer, all these kind of things, it gives you opportunities. And so, but I would say that you don't have to be just like me. There's all sorts of different people who it seems like everybody has something special they bring. And as if you're a leader or somebody who oversees people, you want
right.
to try and bring out whatever the special talent each person has.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I think my next thing is, do you think this job is risky in any way for those different careers that you mentioned in this line of work?
Well, working in the forest, um, I mean, you can think of some natural things, like people might think of animals or something like that. It's probably more like a bee is probably going to be more like what's going to get you than, or a sprained ankle or something like that on a steep slope. But there are hazards, certainly also in the fires, there's always hazards. And of course, we've done a lot of studies and we're always trying, anytime there's an accident, we're trying to figure out what happened and what can we do to mitigate risk. So we always have we have rules and we have guidelines and we have things based on past accidents and past people getting hurt, so we don't so we try and mitigate most of the risk.
Right,
And but again, I talked about earlier, just the fatigue of being on an incident or being on an event for a long period of time and then driving home. We have lost a person driving home after an event, because they crashed their car and unfortunately passed away. So again, that's where those mitigations come from. We have to make sure people are rested, even if it's the morning and they're only 20 minutes from home. We need to make sure they make it home.
right, right. So is there usually like hazard pay offered?
So that's another good question, and I just want to make sure. Okay, yeah. The next question. Okay, so hazard pay. Not all agencies, and I'll just call them agencies right now, offer hazard pay. Typically, the one that does is the federal agency, so the U.S. Forest Service. And if you're ever up in the Lake Tahoe or the mountain areas and you see the light green trucks, the light
Mhm.
green fire trucks, they often have they don't look so much like fire trucks. They look just like box trucks. They have a lot of tools and stuff on them.
Yeah.
Those are federal firefighters. And they do get hazard pay when they're assigned to fires. So, but like there's other ways that state firefighters are paid that compensate them equally. So, but typically the only ones who get hazard pay these days are the federal firefighters.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then I think my next thing is, how do promotions generally work for this career?
Okay, so this is a good question, and I really want to focus in on this too. Um, so think of let's just think of the parks, okay? Because that's the most common thing we have. We have city parks, right? We
Right.
have county parks, we have state parks, and then we have Yosemite. It's a federal park, right?
Right.
So those are all different park levels you could work at. You could go down and work at your local park. You could go work at Big Basin, a state park, right? All of these agencies, as I call them, have what they call open examinations. Open examinations mean that they're open to anybody. It's kind of that entry level point into the agency. Often it's a seasonal position. We need seasonal park workers, for the summer when all our visitors are coming. And you may live up in a Lake Tahoe area and you stay in a dorm with other seasonal park workers and you take care of the park all summer. Those are the open exams. Now, once you're in an agency, they have what they call promotional exams. And those are for the people in the agency to move up. And often, if you're outside, and even if you're qualified, like, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years over here at the county level, I don't want to come in at the bottom with the state. Well, oftentimes you still have to come in at that open level. Now, you may progress further because you had all this experience, but it's kind of like a silo. You have to get in at the bottom and then work your way up through the promotional opportunities. And I'm not saying that's the only way you get in. And certainly I'm talking more about the government jobs versus the private industry jobs. And there are people that I work with that worked in the government, and then they went to private industry, and they were in private industry for 10 years, and then they've gone back to state government, and they've come into a relatively high position because they had prior state government outside experience, and they came back in. But what I'm saying, for a new person, a young person coming out of college, you're probably going to be taking that open exam. And then if you do, and it's always like, I remember somebody saying, when you get a job, it's like a job is like a building that you can't see inside, right? It's locked. You can't get in. But once you get that first job, you're inside now. Now you can see the other jobs. You can see what people do. You can say, oh, I'd like that, or I like that, or you know what, I don't want to be here. I'm getting out of this one and going somewhere else, So I think that getting your foot in the door is the first step.
Right. Then I guess this is more of a follow-up. Is this a stable career, and how long do people generally stay in this field? Because I know you mentioned that you kind of have to rise through the ranks to get to those federal parks.
Yeah, well, especially in the county government, it is a stable career. People stay in the county for a long time. In my experience, most of the people who came to work for us stayed for their whole career. Good retirement plan, good medical plan. So people generally stay, but sometimes people do transition from state to federal, from county to private, or like I described earlier, so.
I think that's pretty much it. My last thing was just, is there anything else you think is important for someone to know who's interested in pursuing this career?
Yes. So what I'm going to do after I get off is I'm going to send you a link to the Society of American Foresters College Guide. Okay, can you see that?
Wow.
There's our college guide.
Yeah.
And it tells you not only about the California colleges, but all the colleges, some questions that you might, and it's just put out by Society of American Foresters. It's really good. So I want to send you that link, and I want you to share it with people, because it really gives a broad perspective. And I would say that this job and this career is not for everyone. Okay, it's not for if you're one of those people who doesn't really like to get dirty and doesn't like to be outside and doesn't like being out when it's windy and cold and rainy. It's great when it's sunny, or maybe you don't want to be outside when it's 105 degrees, then it might not be for you. But if you like being outside, if you like working outdoors, if you like working in small groups, and again, and talking about the government, if you like providing services to others and protecting our environment, then this could be the career for you. And like I say, we need all kinds of people. We need men, we need women, we need all different races. I always feel like that, when I started working in forestry, and I was just talking to this about with a cohort the other day, the people I went to work with were frankly a bunch of older white men, okay? And over time, we've seen, over 30 years, we've seen that transition with different people coming in, different backgrounds, different country, male, female, and there are a lot of opportunities. And I
Yeah.
always feel like it's easy for me. I've been going out to the woods since I was a kid and I feel comfortable there. But I understand not everybody does. And part of the reason they'll feel more comfortable is if they go out and they see people that are like them. So that's why I encourage everybody, if you like it, if you're at least interested, look at our college guide. And it's been a great career for me. So I encourage everybody to think about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.